The word artistic integrity brings back a memory. My second film was Life at the Top, which I shot in England with Lawrence Harvey and Gene Simmons. And there was a screening of the film for Philip Epstein and Julius Epstein. They were the two great writers, wrote Casablanca and many great films of the 40s and the 50s. And the producer was a friend of theirs and invited them to see the film. And I sat next to Philip Epstein after the screening. He said to me, "Ted," he said, you're going to have a wonderful career as a director. I predict that." I said, "From your mouth to God's ear." And he said, "And you'll fight for the artistic integrity of your film with all your might and your mind and your soul. You'll protect it against people who want to interfere with it. But can I give you a word of advice? There's two areas. Don't bother wasting your energy, because you'll never win this battle with distributors." I said, "And what are those?" He said, "Titles and endings." And it happened. And it happens. I lost over this film, Wake in Fright, that I made in Australia. United Artists, when they distributed it in New York, changed the title to Outback. And I said, "Outback? Sounds like a National Geographic documentary. What's the matter with Wake in Fright?" He said, "Sounds like a Hitchcock film." I said, "That's bad." But I didn't win that fight. It came out as Outback, even though I didn't think it was a very commercial title even. What does it mean, Outback? You know, Outback where? Outback of your house? And Wake in Fright was what the film was about. A guy who suddenly wakes up and sees the person he's capable of being. He doesn't like what he sees. Anyway.
No, let's stay right with that. I mean, what did you expect upon the release of Wake in Fright in 1971? And now, what do you expect 40 years later, it being released right now?
Well, when I made the film in 1970 in Australia, and I thought the film was beautifully written and it was well realized, however, when it opened in Australia, I think the Australians kind of responded badly to what they thought was a kind of a unsympathetic depiction of the Aussie male, scurrilous, and so it didn't. Although it got very good reviews from the Australian film critics, nobody came. But the picture had a certain kind of reputation, but commercially did little. Then the film went to the Cannes Film Festival. And of course it was thrilling for a young director like myself to be invited to go to this iconic film festival, the dream of every filmmaker, to be invited. Of course, the French loved the film. The French love that kind of men under existential stress, etc. And it's the only country in the world that was a success. It ran for 9 months on the Champs-Élysées in Paris. 9 months it ran. And then the United Artists released it in America. And the film was, they said, "Oh, Ted," they didn't believe in the film at all. They said, "Americans are not going to come and see this film. They really will be offended by that rather heinous massacre of kangaroos," which was the climax of the film. So, as a result, when they put no money into advertising the film whatsoever. There was no publicity when it opened. It opened in a small cinema on the east side of New York on a Sunday night in a heavy blizzard. And they were right, nobody came. They said, "Told you nobody would come." And there's nothing like distributors for self-fulfilling prophecies. By not spending any money, of course, they guaranteed that nobody would come. Nobody knew of its existence even. But, and so that was it for the film. There was not even any prints for anybody to see it. And 25 years go by. The film originally had been financed half by an Australian company and half by a company called Group W Films, an offshoot of Westinghouse, who had a chain of television stations in New England, in Northeast. And so they started to make films for their television network. But the films didn't succeed, so Group W went bankrupt. And that's always death for a film. The negative, falls in the hands of creditors, They don't know what to do with it. They use it maybe for paying off some other debt, and it's passed around. And the film was worthless as far as they were concerned. The negative, but the film had opened in various places, had not taken any money. United Artists, after the fiasco in New York, it was supposed to open all across the country. They didn't. They yanked it. And that was that. So 25 years goes by, and one of the Australian producers was oppressed by some film society that said, "Where's that film, Awake in Fright? That was rather a good film. I'd like to show it to my students." So he tried to find it, and of course, it had disappeared. And they went to Sydney, they went to London where the film had been processed at Pinewood. Not there. And he couldn't believe it. In rather kind of, he described it in exaggerated fashion as a national disaster because it was a quintessential Australian film. And then the editor, Tony Buckley, he loved the film and thought it was a seminal film, a seminal Australian film. So he set out at his own expense to try to find it. And he traveled in between his jobs for 13 years between jobs. He jumped into a plane, go to London, and they said, "Nah, we sent it to America." He went to Dublin because they heard rumors that there was a print in Dublin, but it turned out to be not the case. Not a usable print anyway. And he went to New York and looked around. He saw 13 years. Finally, he found the negative in a warehouse in Pittsburgh in 2 huge boxes. And it had big red letters on the box, "For destruction." Had he arrived 1 week later, they would have incinerated the negative and the film would have disappeared forever. So I think that story intrigued a lot of people. In Australia, it was huge that they'd found this thing. And the Australian archives come and got the film. And then the negative, they found the negative, but it was useless. It was scratched, torn, damaged, faded. And there's another extraordinary man who loved the film and worked at Deluxe Laboratories in Sydney called Anthony Simon. The next 2 years of his life, in his spare time, he digitally restored the film frame by frame, produced a negative, which produced a positive. It was unbelievable colors and clarity and intensity. And that copy of the film is the one that's going to be shown here in Los Angeles and across the country next Friday, October 19th, at the Nuart Cinema. I think that, and this time, the film was released in Australia, and people flocked to it. It was extraordinary, and now it was opened in New York, and it was sold out every night, and it got unbelievable reviews for it. I couldn't believe it. 40 years after I made this film, it's getting great reviews, and people are coming to see it, where it had failed totally at the beginning. So it's been. I have to tell you, David, this is one of the most extraordinary couple of weeks of my whole life. I've never heard of any such thing in the whole history of filmmaking, that a film succeeds 40 years after you made it.
How do you wrap your mind around that?
I can't. I'm disbelieving. I'm incredulous. This is incredible. But it's been a thrilling experience for me late in my life to have such a thing occur.